The clock is ticking. If you're watching this video when it goes live, we're about a week away from another new version of Skyrim releasing, that with Anniversary Edition. And although I've made several videos talking about this just recently, actually basically covering everything coming with that, but with the release of Skyrim Anniversary Edition, if you don't back up your existing saves, you're gonna kind of hit a point where a bunch of mods break, because there's going to be an update to Skyrim Special Edition in general, even if you don't buy anything. So with that said, we're about a week away from many mods kind of breaking. It's not like a quick fix for several of these. If you're on consoles, you have nothing to worry about. It's really only affecting Skyrim Special Edition mods, unofficial patch, DLL-based mods, etc. So it seemed like a wonderful time to show you the absolutely incredible year Skyrim has been having. If you've just been following Skyrim loosely, or maybe just following Anniversary Edition and not seen some of these mods, it's really one of the best years for Skyrim modding ever. So this will likely be the first of several videos, but if you're watching and you like what you see, definitely download things quickly, because we may have a bit of an intermission after Anniversary Edition comes out where some stuff won't be working immediately. With that said, one of the first mods we have to look at is True Directional Movement, only coming out a couple of months ago, but it is going to be one of those definitive game-defining mods for Skyrim. And depending on your playstyle, this could be one of the biggest releases of the past few years for this game. The main feature it adds in is 360 movement into Skyrim, which is almost hard to put into words. It basically allows you to run in each of the various directions, but the camera is no longer going to be locked to that movement. Hopefully the background footage is conveying this way better than I can verbally, but now more or less what you'll be able to do is walk in any which direction, and your camera can stay fixed in a singular direction, which means you could run side to side or directly at the camera. Now obviously this is really only relevant for third-person players, but it's also just really nice. It really modernizes the third-person perspective in Skyrim and brings it up to what a lot of other games are doing. And although that's kind of the backbone, the cornerstone of this mod, it's really only one aspect of it, and many of the other components of this are what makes it come together to really be a pretty amazing addition to the game overall. One of the other major things it's going to do is add in health bars for enemies when you're in combat, as well as the ability to actually lock on to enemies in combat. The health bar side of this looks really good. You'll just have a health bar floating around enemies, not just floating on your screen permanently. It's another one of those little things that is kind of small at face value, but it does feel like a really nice modernization, and I quite enjoy this. It also doesn't feel out of place at all. I quickly got used to it and just felt like a better version of what was there already. But then also this lock-on / focus functionality. You can have it set up so it'll adaptively switch and automatically lock on when you get into combat with someone, or I prefer the manual version where I locked on and I could switch from enemy to enemy with a hotkey. That's one of those things that I found myself switching in and out of using. It allowed you to keep focus on an enemy, keep focus on a singular target in combat, and it could lead to some really awesome gameplay where you would run away from a locked on target but keep them in focus while you're doing so, almost dodging their attacks in a way. We're not quite full on Dark Souls where you actually do have a dodge button with this mod, although there are other mods that do that, but it did genuinely make it feel like running away was viable and an actual practical way to get into combat. Something that may be controversial one way or the other is it does have a auto lock on for both bows and magic, so when you're shooting an arrow, you'll just hit the target if you're locked onto them. Obviously there's no aiming really as far as which part of the target you'll hit. It'll just kind of shoot at them and normally land on them, but it just kind of works, and it feels okay, especially if you like to play in third person. It feels pretty practical. I would say overall this makes combat feel a bit more fluid, and suddenly horse archery feels awesome to do. This is something that was just not really viable, at least for me. Maybe I just suck though. But now with this mod and actually being able to be on a horse and lock onto enemies and shoot arrows at them while circling around feels awesome, like it's an actual viable way to play. Okay, things may definitely be a little bit OP when you bring a horse into the mix, but either way, it does fully function with horses also, if you're wondering. And the lock-on mechanics as well as health bars do work in first person also. So even if you don't love playing in third person, you're like, all right, maybe this mod isn't for me, it does have that benefit too, which I think is still pretty nice. Another small but pretty cool addition is it makes it so you can manually swim up or down. So you can hit a key and you'll actually descend or ascend in water. No longer do you have to kind of aim yourself to get up or down, which is nice. This entire mod is modular, so if there's one of these components you don't like or do like, you could pretty much turn everything on and off outside of that core 360 movement. That's really the backbone of the mod that will always be there, but all this other stuff you could just never use if you don't want to. Overall, I think this makes combat in Skyrim just feel a lot more modern overall. It can look pretty Soulsy at first glance, but after playing with it for a bit, it started to get a feel for the controls. It just feels really nice. Everything flows together. It's definitely different, and I would even say a lot of people may not look at a 360 movement mod and immediately go to how that'll impact combat, but for me, that was one of the biggest things that it impacted. It's probably going to be one of those things that's not for everyone, but it's also just refreshing. It's a nice way to change up things on a subsequent playthrough, and I'm sure you've probably played Skyrim at one point by now. But a phenomenal tandem mod to use in addition to true directional movement is Underdog, as what this will do is overhaul many of the animations your character will do, and to a degree other characters will do in third person, or at least while you're in third person. So now your character will play different animations when you're running, when you're actually full on sprinting, when you are sneaking in Skyrim. One of the cool parts about this mod is there are several variations on all of these and different criteria to hit. So just running around by itself is different, but let's say you accidentally get injured, you will actually start doing a limping animation, and even cooler, there's levels to this. So if you are severely injured, you'll have a slightly different animation than if you're moderately or lightly injured. Or if let's say you get low on stamina, you'll have a more tired movement style. And as you can hopefully see at least somewhat in the background now, there's a wide range of animations added in with this and a lot of different criteria to hit on them. I'm just naming some of the big ones, but even just some odd stuff like using torches. There's all kinds of different variables: interior, exterior, are you sneaking, are you not? And you get character specific change ups. So let's say you actually get your stamina to a high degree, you'll be doing a different sprint as a result. There's a ton of little things like that all factored in with this mod. Overall, I think it's just a really cool one. Spending a lot of time in third person, which if you're using true directional movement, you almost certainly will spend a lot of time in third person. This keeps things fresh, as well as it's pretty modular. So if you don't like much of what you're seeing, you can actually turn some of these off or only select some of these to be applicable, not all of them. But then one I'm like 50-50 if I'll actually pronounce correctly, we do have Folkvangr. Now that you're going to be spending a ton of time running around in third person, you probably want some pretty background or world spaces to look at, and that's what this is going to do. At the end of the day, it's kind of a grass mod at its core, but I really like the way this is implemented because it makes it feel like there are distinctive and unique biomes in Skyrim. There is a huge amount of diversity to encounter with this one. If you go from Iverstead with its lush fall colors to Dragonbridge, which is actually a pretty tame greenery, you will just start to see that vast difference as you traverse this landscape overall. And it's one of those mods that while filming for this video, even after I stopped the focus on the mod directly at later points while filming other mods, I would just stop and like take it in because it just makes Skyrim look so friggin' pretty at some points. On the front of diversity, I like how it's not all just super lush, super bright, or even just super green. You will see a wide range of colors depending on where you are or where you go. Sometimes that does involve a ton of different bright colors. Sometimes it's relatively tame and sometimes it's almost even dull. But I would say even with each of those, it is still pretty. It is still a really nice landscape. And a nice smaller detail of this one is it actually adds in little droppings or trees, leaves, etc. on roads. So you'll find stuff actually covering the roads as you're running around Skyrim, which on that front, maybe you are actually tired of running around Skyrim. So next up, we do have SKYRIM'S Paraglider. That's a super simple one, but another awesome addition to the game. Have you ever played Breath of the Wild? Well, I haven't, but apparently it has this glider and it's Zelda. As you could probably guess, what SKYRIM'S Paraglider is going to do is literally just add in the functional glider for you to move more quickly or just more funly traverse the world of Skyrim. It kicks off with a relatively short and honestly quite pleasant quest. I definitely laughed more than I probably should have at the opening of this one, which I'll not spoil for you, but it is pretty funny. And then after completing that quest, you actually get the paraglider for yourself, and you basically, when falling, can now just hit the use key, which on PC is the E key, and you will take out your paraglider and be able to fly around, gliding wherever you wish. It's a really simple one, but honestly one of those mods that I think is worth a download because one time you'll be at the top of a mountain, have to get to the bottom of a mountain, you'll remember you have this installed, and you're gonna have a smile on your face as a result. While in air, you actually do have the ability to put it away, so you could just enter into a free fall and then take it out again to quickly descend if you're going that route. I'm honestly not sure if this will make it so you can traverse more quickly around Skyrim running at points, and of course obviously fast traveling at points is always going to be quicker, but definitely is the fun factor, and Skyrim has a lot of peaks. This will definitely make you notice that, and I at times ran up to the top of a mountain just so I could jump off of it, and it definitely meshes quite well with the previous mod because now that you're flying through the air just taking in the landscape, it does make sense for the landscape to look way better. And also when you're installing this one, there's a few different skins you can pick if that's your cup of tea. Then we do have Valravn, or at least that's how I think you say it, which is going to be the latest and greatest combat overhaul from Anai for Skyrim. And this definitely has some pretty interesting and unique change-ups over even some of the alternatives out there, but a lot of similarities. In general, after installing this mod, enemies are going to be more aggressive. It removes that hesitation without overdoing it, I feel. The enemies aren't too aggressive, but they will run up to you, they will stay stay in proximity to you, not just kind of haphazardly be over there. It changes up how things like health and stamina and magicka actually regen, the regen speed, as well as the timing on it. Stamina management in general is definitely a larger part of this mod. You can no longer just spam power attacks with 1 stamina remaining. You'll have to have a decent amount to actually perform them. And speccing into stamina, whether you're an archer or just a regular warrior, is relevant and definitely something you're going to want to do. One thing you'll definitely notice is weapons have realistic reach. That has been completely adjusted with this mod. So obviously longer weapons will reach out further than shorter weapons. When in combat, and especially when swinging, moving, and turning speed is heavily reduced, you kind of have to commit to your attacks. Directional blocking is a factor here, so actually keeping your crosshairs pointed at an attacker as they attack you and while you're blocking will lead to way less damage. Damage overall is increased, so you get higher damage dealt and received, as well as catching an enemy off guard will actually deal extra damage, and there's tiers to this. If they're pulling back a bow, it's a small bonus, but if you completely surprise attack them, you'll deal a huge double damage bonus. And the way this is designed, it's not actually supposed to make Skyrim harder per se, as all of these changes are impacting both you and other NPCs, and I'm kind of just glossing over them. And although that's kind of the list of some of the major things this is changing up, there's a huge list on the mod page if you're interested. After actually playing with it, it's a pretty interesting experience. One of the biggest takeaways I had was things felt higher stakes. Making sure you block or maneuver to avoid damage seems far more important with this mod, and you really start to notice that reach difference. I found myself kind of playing at the edge of my reach, or sometimes just beyond that. I would move back or move away to try and keep enemies at bay, not just trying to rely on my blocks, but actually trying to stay out of range of them. And weapon reach really felt like a huge influence here. Using longer weapons genuinely felt viable because I could hit enemies after they miss a swing if they were using a smaller weapon than I was. The aggression was definitely obvious, but you still were able to create distance between enemies if you're trying to, but getting away is not easy. The movement changes definitely make it feel like you are forced to commit to attacks more. I was way more wary to use a power attack and lunge towards an enemy because I would kind of be stuck there. It would leave me open for a few seconds. And I would say overall, what this really did is made me think a lot more in combat compared to vanilla Skyrim. The consequences were higher across the board. I had enemies one-shotting me more than ever before, and mistakes were punished with this. But at the same time, it didn't necessarily make the combat feel harder. If I did just take a couple of steps back, have an enemy swing and miss, and then take them off with my greatsword, I could one-hit a lot of enemies and clear through things relatively quickly. You just had to be conscious of that, not get careless, or at least not as careless as I typically am in Skyrim. I really felt like relying on counters and timing was way more relevant than it typically would be, especially when an enemy would power attack you and leave themselves open the same way I would hypothetically leave myself open against them. And at the end of the day, with a mod like this, it's really going to be subjective. It's one of the newest combat mods, but is it the best one? There are a ton of different options, even several from this mod author. I personally had a ton of fun with this one. I definitely think it's going to be one of my favorites across the board, and if nothing else, it's fun to try on a new playthrough, try yet another iteration and change up on Skyrim's combat. It definitely has its own set of unique components that makes it feel different enough, but still like it's Skyrim. You're not trying to turn the game into something else here. But then we do have Cities of the North, and for some of you, this is going to sound familiar because you may have downloaded one of these mods, but a new one literally just came out. So technically, these are 4 distinctive mods, but really you should just download all of them because they are absolutely amazing. What it's going to do is actually overhaul a city in Skyrim, and the most recent release here is Cities of the North Falkreath. And as you could kind of see, what it'll be is a comprehensive overhaul of this city. It really hits on all cylinders in this regard. Structures are not only changed visually, but literally moved. The fundamental layout of the city is modified with this one. Obviously, there's still walls and stuff inside the walls, but there are some pretty substantial changes. The textures are overhauled. The 4 cities impacted by these mods will now have their own unique tile set, and this extends to many of the interiors. They'll still be pretty similar, have a more similar layout, but there will be a lot of fundamental differences with the visual aspect of those interiors. But the focus of this mod overall is to give some of these smaller cities in Skyrim their own identity, and it absolutely does this. This Falkreath is notable and it stands out. You'll remember this location. It features its own design and flavor, and like I said earlier, this doesn't only apply to Falkreath, but this is the 4th release in the series, so if you missed the last ones, definitely download those also. You can get this for Falkreath, Winterhold, Morthal, as well as Dawnstar at this point. And what I would say this does is it takes the forgettable components of those cities and actually makes them stand out now. A lot of times they were in pretty places, but now the architecture is a selling point. You really notice when you're walking up because they look completely different. The buildings are distinctive. And whenever you have mods like this that do bring out such significant changes to the visuals of certain places in Skyrim, it can be pretty polarizing. But for me, I absolutely adore the changes this one makes. It just feels like it fits in Skyrim. It doesn't feel out of place whatsoever. And sometimes it even adds in a couple of cool features to the cities. Although one consideration, you do have to start a new character for this to actually function properly, otherwise you'll have some floating signs or something like that. And if you actually have downloaded some of the older ones in the past, they have been getting updates. Some of them getting updates very recently. So, if you're on the way to download Cities of the North Falkreath, I have links to all the other ones in the description down below also if you're interested in them alternatively. And just as an aside, I would say this mod, probably more so than anything else in this video, kind of blew me away, especially the newest release with Falkreath. It just looks so freaking cool. When you read the description or hear about something that overhauls a city of Skyrim, you just think, oh, it's going to be a new texture or things will look a little bit different. But this does so much more than that, and it really does make these cities so pretty and memorable. With that said, hopefully you guys found this one informative. Again, you are on a bit of a countdown here. Back up your saves. Make sure your Skyrim is not going to update if you have a huge load order so it doesn't break it. To be clear, this is only applicable to PC users. So if you're playing on consoles, you don't have to worry about any of this. You will still be getting the update on consoles, but you won't have SKYRIM'S and DLL based mods breaking because unfortunately you don't actually have those mods at all on consoles. As far as the Skyrim content going forward, I'm going to be covering Skyrim Anniversary Edition extensively, as well as I have a ton of other mods I wanted to include in this video. I can imagine some of you are commenting down below, wait, what about this or that? Trust me, there's a ton of other stuff I wanted to add. I just don't have the time to do it right now. It's already a pretty long video. So hopefully over the next couple of months, you'll start to see more regular and frequent Skyrim content. The modding scene has just been doing amazing recently, and I definitely want to highlight that more, including whatever happens with this whole before and after with the Anniversary Edition. With that said, if you're curious about what the Anniversary Edition is adding in, you can actually click on screen now to get that. Otherwise, as always, again, I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.